Focus now on our main story, the inquest into the death of the MI6 codebreaker Gareth Williams. The coroner concluded he was probably killed unlawfully with poisoning and asphyxiation, the foremost contenders. Coroner Dr. Fiona Wilcox said she found the lack of hand and footprints in Mr. Williams' bathroom significant, concluding that a third party moved the bag containing Gareth into the bath. She was also highly critical of the way the police and security services dealt with the death, highlighting mix-ups in DNA and evidence submitted late or mishandled. She speculated that leaks about his private life to the press were an attempt by some third party to manipulate the evidence. And she said security service involvement in his death remained a legitimate line of inquiry. Well, with me in the studio is the former senior investigating officer for the Met Police's murder squad, Colin Sutton, and the former chairman of the Intelligence and Security Committee, Kim Howells, joins us from Cardiff. So, Colin Sutton, I believe you were there on the night that Gareth Williams was reported missing. You took the call. Clearly, justice has not been done for his family. Who do you believe was to blame?
Well, I think there are a number of factors that have contributed to the rather unsatisfactory position we find ourselves in. It was clear from the night I was asked to attend, on the night that Gareth Williams was found, that there was a possibility of some tension between the security services and the police, and indeed in between various parts of the Metropolitan Police. My brief was to go down there and make sure that the homicide team took primacy in the investigation. And it seems to me that 20 months on, we don't seem to have really resolved that problem and that tension.
Kim Howells, let's focus on MI6's failure to report the spy missing for a week. I mean, how much is MI6 failing to blame for this, do you think?
Well, it's hard to know what Gareth Williams was involved in, of course. He may have been on some kind of operation where he was not expected to come into Vauxhall Cross, the headquarters of the Secret Intelligence Service. But it seems from Sir John Sawyer's apology that wasn't the case, and that it was simply that his line manager didn't take the action that he should have taken. But it's one of the mysteries of this whole case. I mean, it seems as if it's ridden with inconsistencies and doubts.
Do you think MI6 is guilty of incompetence or worse?
Well, I don't know. They're not an incompetent organization. They're a superbly professional organization. But here something seems to have gone very wrong. And I think there are lots of things that have got to be investigated further. Who leaked this information about Gareth Williams' private life, even if it's true? This was a murder inquiry, or at least it was an inquiry of a death that looked like a murder, and yet somebody was leaking this stuff constantly. You know, was it a dirty tricks operation by some agents of some other country, or was it some policeman who was in the pay of some media empire or something? Who knows? But whatever it was, it shouldn't have happened. I mean, this is something which should have been kept back as evidence.
Colin Sutton, what do you think about the leaks about his private life?
I don't know either. It's an unfortunate fact of life that snippets of information about investigations of all sorts do get leaked. Sometimes mischievously, sometimes just carelessly. We don't know how that happened.
What about the counter-terrorism officers, though? I mean, obviously there were these memory sticks that weren't passed on to the police investigating. Yeah. There was the fact that there were no signed witness statements. I mean, that particular SO15, that particular branch of the police, are as culpable as MI6 in all these mix-ups and muddle-ups.
Yes, I think I agree. You know, we've got three very competent organisations in the security services, SO15 and the Homicide and Serious Crime Directorate. From my point of view as a former police officer, I'm just staggered that the two branches of the Metropolitan Police in this case, SO15 and the Homicide and Serious Crime Command, don't seem to have talked to each other. The senior investigating officer needed to know of the existence of these memory sticks and the existence of this bag, even if she weren't to be allowed to have access to the full contents. The fact that she only found out in the witness box at an inquest that they existed is scandalous.
Well, I just want to bring in Annie Machon now, who from Germany, the author and ex-MI5 officer. What do you read into these failings by MI6? What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's a tragedy for the family because of all these mistakes, they probably will never know what actually happened to their son and to their brother. But I do think it's sort of emblematic to a certain extent about how MI6 and the other British spy communities tend to treat the law. They seem to think they're above British justice quite often, and they can hide behind the Official Secrets Act and the catch-all phrase of national security so that they are never held to account. So the very fact that you have a situation where they withhold vital evidence, which would have been demanded from any other organisation by the police, is, I think, scandalous, and also, as I said, a tragedy for the family because they will never know what happened to Gareth.
Kim Howes, do you think the Secret Services are above justice?
No, I don't think they're above justice, but I do think that we're going through a very, very important period in the history of the security services in this country where society is demanding much more transparency and openness. And whether they understand that and they've learned that lesson or not, I don't know. And also, of course, we've got to ask ourselves as a society if it's right that all secrets if you like, must be abolished, and that they must work completely openly. I don't think you can do that with security services. I think that there have to be secrets, but in a case like this, there seems to me to be no excuse whatsoever for the various agencies investigating a death like this not passing information to each other as quickly and as honestly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, there is a need for openness, and it may well be that certain organisations within this country are slower to pick that up. There must be secrets, but there shouldn't be secrets that don't need to be kept, and that's the answer here. Somebody within the Metropolitan Police should have had access, should have the clearance to have access to whatever was on those memory sticks. That information should have been shared and then filtered so that the things that were going to be, or potentially could have been vital to the investigation into what happened to Gareth Williams, were given to the senior investigating officer, and the secrets could remain secret. And that's what should have happened.
Annie Matchon, aren't we talking about incompetence by the Secret Services rather than anything more sinister?
Well, I think certainly we're looking at a dereliction of care for a member of their staff. The fact they didn't even seem to notice that Gareth hadn't turned up for work for about a week. And also it seems very obvious that he was unhappy with his secondment in MI6. So all these sort of issues should have been picked up by his staff, and they weren't. So for him, you know, for any organisation, for a member of staff not to show up for work for a whole week would be unusual and would cause concern. But for a secret organisation and a member of staff who's working on very sensitive operations, I think it is a scandal. I mean, MI6 always makes great noise about protecting national security and needing to protect national security and keeping itself secret and never revealing anything about its work. But then they don't seem to necessarily have a proper duty of care towards their staff and also perhaps towards their agents. And I do think Mr. Howells is right to a certain extent that they need to think about moving towards greater transparency in this country because, of course, they are the most legally protected and most unaccountable of public agencies. And I think democracy is shifting and transparency is being forced on some of these organisations to a greater extent by whistleblowers and WikiLeaks and things like that. They need to catch up. But again, it comes back to this sort of tragedy for this family.
Kim Howells, the Met Police is investigating rendition in Libya. That will involve probing MI5 and MI6. Are they up to the job?
Well, it's hard to say, really. I mean, we elect people to positions because we trust them. And if it's always said that elected individuals can't do the job, that it's got to be done either by lawyers, by judges, or by police officers, then it's a kind of indictment of democracy. And I just don't believe that. I think sometimes you've got to trust people, but we have to be sure about the systems. Annie's quite right. Society is changing. It's demanding far, far greater transparency than it did previously. And we have to have the mechanisms there that are going to ensure that.
Colin Sutton, just briefly, what is your best guess about what happened?
My best guess is that somebody else was involved. My best guess is it probably didn't involve his job. It was probably something else. But can I just make one point, I think, that on what Mr. Howell said? The Metropolitan Police are definitely up to the job of investigating anything at all, but they need to be allowed to investigate and they need to be allowed access to the information which will make that investigation a thorough one.
Colin Sutton, Annie Matchon, Kim Howells, thank you very much all for joining us.